Now we're starting a new series, and I'm excited about it. It's called Home Improvements. How many people remember that series, Home Improvement, from the 90s? Yeah, that's right. You got it. Yeah, Binford. We needed some Binford tools today, but we didn't have any. But the whole idea behind this series is kind of, I thought of wearing plaid, or I don't know, we didn't get that carried away, but I thought of growing a mullet again, but then I thought, no, I can't really do that anymore. Anyway, and you're glad, aren't you? You're thrilled. But the bottom line with this series, Home Improvements, is we wanted to look at blueprints for creating a God-centered family. What's the map, so to speak? What's the design and the way we're supposed to live so that in our church family and in our own family, our home family, we can live the way God wants us to live? I mean, how many people know that if you're going to build a house, you're going to have the right blueprints? If you don't build it properly, it'll fall down, right? And if you're here in construction, you understand that. There's ways to build it. There's blueprints. There's right ways. There's wrong ways. You just have to look at TV. Who's the guy that always goes in and everything's wrong and he rips down all the walls? And that's right. Exactly. Goes in. And I think, I've never seen a house yet that he saw that was okay. Every house is wrong, right? This is wrong. He's ripping it all down. Then he makes it all good. Well, the problem was when that house was built, Mike Holmes points out it wasn't done right. The guy chinched on the code, and the wiring was done wrong, and the plumbing was bad. So the idea is, hey, let's do things right from the start. Let's not have to do a tear down in our lives. Let's be living properly. Let's build the right house. Let's build the right family. Let's build the right church family. Let's follow the right codes. So today I want to talk about the code for conflict. I was going to say the code of conduct. We have one of those in our church for leaders. The code for conflict. And again, when you build a house, you know that you have to follow the codes for the community, for the city, for the township, whatever. There's certain codes have to be followed about how things are built. So we're going to look at what is the biblical code for how to deal with conflict. How many people know that conflict is inevitable? Anybody here never had conflict with anyone? Oh, Lyndon. Yeah, I believe that. Richie. Of course, Richie. Never. Yeah. We're going to pray for lying after the service, okay? We've all had conflict. In fact, here's the thing. In life, you're going to have conflict. It's going to be part of life. But the key is, how do you deal with it? What is your posture? What are the principles you follow when you have conflict? That's the key. You will have conflict, but what you do when you have conflict will either make it worse or will make it better and solve it. I don't know about you, but I don't like the worst part. Anybody been in the worst part? Things just got worse? I don't like that part. I like the better part, where we solve it, we reconcile, we work through it, and it's healthy. Well, that's what we want to look today. I want to examine that. There's a man on a shipwrecked island, and he was industrious, hardworking. He was actually on his own. He was marooned there. His plane crashed, and he was on his own. So he was there for 15 years on his own. So he's really industrious. He's really good at building things. So 15 years later, they finally got to the island where this guy was. And so they found him, but it was amazing what he had done. He'd been industrious. He hadn't just sat around for the 15 years. They saw roads and buildings. They were amazed at his accomplishments. They took a tour and they said, well, what is all this? This is incredible. The guy said, well, the first building on our left, that's my house. There's 3 bedrooms. There's a sprinkler system and indoor plumbing. They're like, wow, this is nicer than some of the houses we have on the mainland. This is incredible. And then he goes on. He says, yeah, I have a storage shed in the back. And he leads them over. He goes, over there's the store. That's where I get all my stuff at the store. And there's my bank. Over there I built a bank. That's the bank. And across the street I go over there and I exercise every day. And they're like, wow, that's amazing. And then there was 2 buildings they noticed that were just a little further off. And so he goes, they say, well, what are those 2 buildings over there? And he goes, well, the one on the left, that's where I go to church. They say, well, what's the one on the right? Oh, that's where I used to go to church. Now, kind of a lame joke. But the reality is sometimes that's the case in our lives, right? We have relationships, not necessarily just going to church, but sometimes that could be symptomatic. We have a church family and we move on to another church family because we had a problem or an offense. And sometimes it's in our families and our relationships. We have a relationship and we move on and we say, well, that's my new relationship and I've let go of those old ones. We don't want to be those people that let go of the old ones. So let's look at the code today and let's see what God has for us. Now, there are 2 passages I want to look at. where I believe the code is spelled out. Matthew 5, here's the first one. It says this, 23 to 25. So if you are presenting a sacrifice at the altar in the temple, and you suddenly remember that someone has something against you, leave your sacrifice there at the altar. Go and be reconciled to that person. Then come and offer your sacrifice to God. That's the first passage. Jesus is talking about what do you do when you have a problem with somebody else. Let's look at Matthew 18. Now, Matthew 18, again, as far as this code, as far as how we deal with problems with others, Matthew 18 is really, really pivotal. Let's read this. If another believer sins against you, go privately and point out the offense. If the other person listens and confesses it, you have won that person back. But if you are unsuccessful, take one or two others with you and go back again, so that everything you say may be confirmed by 2 or 3 witnesses. If the person still refuses to listen, take your case to the church. Then if he or she won't accept the church's decision, treat that person as a pagan or a corrupt tax collector. In other words, you're not going to be able to fellowship with them anymore. There just isn't any common ground. That's what it's saying, okay? But there's a whole process here that it talks about how to deal with issues. Now, again, I want to stress something. And I think this is really important, especially for where our church is at right now. You know, as a church grows, it's exciting. But also there's new people that are coming in that have to connect with one another, that have to get to know each other. And so, again, I think that one of the reasons, God, I sense in my heart we really need to talk about this is so that we're all clear on how biblically we should deal with it. But here's the other thing, I believe. I watched this over the years, and it's almost like at the most crucial moments of a church's life, it seems like those are the moments when issues pop up. I don't know if you've ever seen that. I have. I've been around long enough that I've watched it. Now, here's what I think happens. Can I just tell you this? We know there's a devil, right? I mean, we're Christians. We believe that. There's an enemy of our souls that attacks us, that wants to attack us. We have the power of God. We have the angels of heaven. We are overcomers. But we know that there's an enemy. And we know that what happens is in our lives sometimes, there are issues that build up. There's unforgiveness, there's some bitterness, there's some problems in the past. Here's what I think happens. I think that the enemy knows and watches us and he goes, that person has a real bitterness in this one area. You know, I'm going to leave that alone for now. But at the optimum time, when things are starting to really cook and get going, I'm going to remote control detonate it. Like, you know what I mean? It's like he's standing there with a detonator, right? And you're walking, the person's walking around oblivious, and all of a sudden he goes, and it's like, boom, this whole issue explodes at the maximum time to take out the most people, okay? Does that make sense? Have you ever seen that happen? I've seen it happen. You're like, where did that come from? Why did that happen right now? Well, because I think the devil knew that it could create some problem. It could cause some division. It could slow things down. So here's the key for us. One, we don't want to be those people, do we? You don't want to be that guy, do you? Right? The guy with the issues that suddenly are going to flare up at the wrong moment? No, we don't want to be that person. We want to deal with our stuff now so that later the enemy can't have anything. You know, Jesus said, he said, the devil has nothing in me. That's what he said. He said, he has nothing in me. You know what Jesus was saying? He's saying there's nothing in my life. There's no sin. There's no issue that the enemy can grab a hold of. Now, I don't think any of us rightfully can say that here. I mean, I'd like to tell you that, but I'm not confident of that. I know there's things I'm working through like you are, and God is gracious. He's helping us, right? But the bottom line, our goal is that there be nothing in us that the enemy could grab a hold of and trip us up with. There'd be nothing there. He'd be like trying to grab us. He's like, I can't get a hold of him. There's nothing for me to grab onto. So God wants a people like that. He wants us to be like that. Now, again, today, if you're not there like I'm not there, you don't need to be condemned. You say, God, I want to get there, though. I want my heart to be whole. I want the bitterness out of my life. I want to deal with things properly. So that's why I believe this is so important. So here are some keys, I believe, from these two passages that I think are really important when we have to deal with problems with other people. Number one, first one is this. Go quickly. Go quickly. See, here's what it says in Matthew 5. It says, if you're presenting a sacrifice at the altar, in other words, if you're worshiping God or it could either be worshiping God in song or just with my life. I'm trying to serve God. I'm trying to honor God. And in the course of that, you realize God convicts you and says, you actually have something against that person. You're offended. You're bitter. You have unforgiveness. If you realize that that's the case, it's saying this: leave your sacrifice at the altar, go and be reconciled. In other words, there's an implication of quickness. Wouldn't you agree with that? It's kind of like leave it there and go get things right with that person. There's kind of an immediacy to it. And I think that's where the go quickly comes from. It needs to be handled quickly. Now, here's the problem. I don't know about you, but I've done this. If you don't deal with something right away, you're less likely to deal with it at all. You ever found that out? I mean, you have that initial moment where you know something's wrong, where you know you should say something, you know you should do something. But like I often say before, you lie down until the feeling goes away and you feel better. It's okay now, right? But it isn't okay now. But you let it go long enough that conviction, that feeling went away. And so here's the implication of this. It's almost like this passage is saying that how you and I relate to others and how in line we are relationally to others is more important to God than even our worship. It's like God saying, you're there worshiping me. Oh, I love you, God, right? You're worshiping me. But in your heart, you're hating your brother. You're upset at your brother. You're angry. You're unforgiving. God's saying, I'm having a hard time receiving this right now. You're wanting to worship me. I'm looking at you. I'm looking at you in your heart. But I see this unforgiveness. And so I'm having a hard time receiving this true worship because you're having a problem with your brother. 1 John 4:20 says this: if someone says, I love God, but hates a fellow believer, that person's a liar. For if we don't love people we can see, how can we love God whom we cannot see? Now, this is a tough passage, right? Because sometimes, I don't know about you, but sometimes you could say, God, it would be so easy to love you without all the people in my life, right? It's just those other people that make it so hard for me to love you because they're so imperfect and you're so perfect and I just want to love you. And God says, how you treat other people and how you honor or not other people is how you're treating me. I tie the two things together. You can't say, I hate my brother and I love you, God. God says, no, you have to love your brother. You have to deal with your brother or sister properly because otherwise I don't feel the love. I'm not feeling the love from you. And that's what the passage says. We can't say that. And it even says, if you can't love someone you can see, how are you going to love God whom you can't see? And that's actually a really good principle too. Because the people in front of us, this is the beauty actually of being part of a life group, a small group. Can I just tell you this? See, often we think about being part of a small group only from a select few categories. We think, okay, that'll be good. I study the Bible together, that's good. We have some worship together, pray for each other, that's good. But we forget one element of it that's actually really helpful to us. It can create and develop our character. See, we don't always like that, right? But if we're in a small group where people, sometimes it's like, that person irritates me. The life group would be perfect if that person weren't in the life group. Well, maybe you're that person, to be honest. But anyway, but you know what I'm saying? Like sometimes there's people, and God's saying, actually, I'm using, that person's like an instrument in my hand to sculpt you. I'm actually causing you to grow in grace through that person. So you should be thankful for that person because I'm growing you. And so there you go. And the other thing is you can be that person to other people. And you probably are more than you realize, to be honest. I say that in love. But my point is we all get to fellowship and walk with each other. We get to show our strengths and we also get to show our weaknesses at times. But part of being a healthy church family is that we learn how to walk through those weaknesses. And instead of them tripping us up and stopping us, they actually become a place of growth. Isn't that good? How many people like to grow? Some of you do. Okay. Well, hopefully the others will get a burn for it as well. Growth is good, but sometimes it's not easy. Okay, Romans 12 says this. If you ever wonder how much it depends on us, look what Romans 12 says. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. As far as it depends on you. And it's like, God, that's not fair. So you're kind of throwing it on me. You're saying, You're saying, I need to do whatever I can to be at peace with other people to the maximum of my ability. He says, yeah, absolutely. As far as it depends on you. Now, we know that it only goes so far, right? You can't convince somebody else to forgive you or restore relationship with you or change their bad attitude towards you. You can't do that. If they choose not to respond to God and they choose not to do the right thing, that's out of your hands. But as far as it depends on you and I, we need to do the right things to see good relationship develop around us. That is the onus. There is an onus on us. And you're going to see that even more, how God puts that focus on us. I remember my Bible teacher back in Portland, Oregon. I went to Portland Bible College. And he had a saying, and he said this. Here's the saying. And it fits with this passage. He says, the one who knows goes. The one who knows goes. So you're saying, God, you mean like if I'm kind of in the right and I'm not even the one offended, like this guy's offended because I wear green shirts all the time, and that person's offended and it's his or her issue, like why are they so offended at me? And like it's their problem, not mine, like I haven't done anything wrong. You mean if I know they're offended at me, I should do something about it? Well, that's what it seems to indicate. I should try to build the bridge, even if it's not my offense, even if it's not my fault. The Bible says, as far as it depends on you, you should make peace with that person. Hey, listen, I hear you have something about green shirts, right? I just need to talk this through. I'm never going to wear a green shirt again. Well, I don't know if that would be the right thing, but I'm just saying, I want to work this through with you. I want to walk this through because as far as it depends on me, the one who knows goes. I've done this before. I've heard of things. I've had issues that have been brought to my attention. The other person hadn't come to me yet, hadn't brought it to me, but I became aware, and so I went to them. I called about it right away. I made sure to get with them. Okay, let's talk about this. Because I thought, I'm not going to leave this out there. I'm not just going to let this go. I know there's an offense, so I'm going to go in and I'm going to probe it. I want to see if it can be healed. Or maybe it won't be, but at least I did what I could do. Now, see, here's why we can do this. Because Jesus does this with us, doesn't he? Jesus is the one who takes the initiative with you and I. You and I, none of us here would have any relationship with God at all if God hadn't initiated reconciling with us through Jesus. God is the one who sent Jesus to earth to die, he lived a sinless life. He's the Son of God, but he died on the cross. He bore our sins. Then he rose again from the grave. And because he did that, we can have a relationship with God. But he initiated it. Had God done wrong? What was in it for God? Well, what was in it for God is renewed relationship with you and I. That's what was in it for him. He was willing to do whatever it took to have that. But he initiated it. So he never asks us to do anything he hasn't done. Jesus is the perfect example. So he says to us, look, just like I initiated, just like I went and tried to work it out, he's saying, I challenge you to do the same. I challenge you to go and initiate and rebuild that relationship. As far as it depends on you, as much as you can do, see that relationship rebuilt. Do your best. Now, there's times when we can't. To be honest, there's times we can't do that, right? Everybody here would know of times like that. There's times where it just isn't possible, right? To do that, to build that relationship again. But those are the moments that you and I need to release forgiveness. That's when we need to cancel the debt. God, I'm not saying that what that person did was right. I'm not saying that I'm, in agreement with what they did to me. It was still wrong. But God, I am choosing to cancel the debt. I am choosing to forgive them because I don't want to walk in prison. I don't want this on me, and I want to release them so that they can come to know you and they can eventually repent. But I'm choosing. I'm not saying what they did was right. That's part of the problem, many times, right? We don't want to forgive. You know why? Because we think if we hold on, that guy doesn't deserve my forgiveness. What he did was wrong to me. That person doesn't deserve my forgiveness. I'm not giving them my forgiveness. Well, that's not the issue at all. See, Jesus has forgiven us. He challenges us to do likewise. So when we forgive someone, we're not saying they were okay, but we're on our end, we're just saying, I cancel the debt and I release them. God, you deal with them now. And that frees us from unforgiveness. That frees us from the poison and the bitterness You know, there's some people here today, I just sense this, and that's an issue for you. You know it. There's some bitterness. There's an area of your heart that's bitter. And you've even said to God, there is no way I'm forgiving that person. They haven't even shown ever an interest in trying to make things right with me. In fact, they stonewall me. They won't even take my calls. They won't even respond to anything. And I'm fed up, and I am not forgiving them. But here's what I sense from the Lord for you. If that's you, if that hits you at all today, he just says, listen, I want to free you. You really need to let this go. You really need to forgive and cancel that debt because it's eating you up. It's eating you up. It's amazing how unforgiveness eats us up. We think we're punishing that person. You know what? We're not punishing them at all. We're punishing ourselves. And today, some of you here, you need to let that go. You say, God, I'm choosing to release that person. I'm choosing to forgive. I'm choosing to cancel that debt. Something for you to think about as we continue here. So the one who knows goes. Now, avoiding an issue is not good either. There's a story in the Bible in the Old Testament. And it's how many people know there's some really awkward stories in the Old Testament? You ever read those? It's like, wow, really? That's amazing. So there's one of those awkward stories. I mean, it's just it's a tough story to read. And in the story, there's one of David's daughters is named Tamar. And her brother, David had a lot of children. Her brother Amnon fell in love with Tamar, which is his sister. So that's obviously inappropriate, awkward, and not right. But he fell in love with his sister. And so anyway, bottom line is he rapes her. Terrible. And then he despises her after he rapes her. And Tamar has an older brother named Absalom. Okay? So David hears of this. The Bible's really clear. He hears about this situation. Terrible situation. He's the father. Right? What's he going to do? What should he do about it? Well, in essence, he doesn't do anything about it. I mean, could you imagine that's a tricky situation? One of your sons has raped his sister, and I mean, it's a tough situation. He doesn't do anything about it. He just lets it go, lets it go. So what happens is Absalom, the brother, is really angry at Amnon. And so eventually he has him killed, which is terrible. But then, not only that, Absalom, anybody know, if you've read the story, goes on to mount a campaign against David and take over the kingdom. And so he has a rebellion. And in the end, Absalom dies. It's a terrible story. But part of the issue is really, if we think about it, David never dealt with it in the first place. He never did anything. He let it go. He avoided it. Now, that's a severe example. Would you agree with me? That's a very severe example. But in a measure, the same thing happens in your and my life when we avoid stuff. We hope it goes away. Has anybody ever realized that when you hope something goes away, it doesn't? It gets worse usually, right? It's like that bearing in the front wheel of your car that starts squealing. See, I had to repair mine lately. But it starts squealing. And if you just think, that'll just go away. How many people know it won't? How many people know it'll get really loud? How many people know your wheel could fall off? Like, you know what I mean? Bad things can happen when we avoid it. Avoidance is bad. God says, don't avoid. As far as it's possible, you need to deal with it. Ephesians 4 says this. Here's a picture it gives us. We will speak the truth in love, growing in every way more and more like Christ, who is the head of his body, the church. We will speak the truth in love. The Bible says this. When you and I talk to each other and have to confront each other, we need to speak the truth, but we need to do it in love. Jesus was perfect at having what we call grace and truth, right? He could bring truth in a way. He didn't lie. He brought truth, but he did it in a way that was gracious, that was loving, that actually cared about the individual that was involved. That was Jesus, grace, truth. Sometimes we want to throw truth away and not be honest with each other. No, be honest, but show it in grace. Here's what Ephesians 4 says. Here's the right attitude. Therefore, I, a prisoner for serving the Lord, beg you to lead a life worthy of your calling. Look at verse 2. Always be humble and gentle. Be patient with each other, making allowance for each other's faults because of your love. Make every effort to keep yourselves united in the Spirit, binding yourselves together with peace. Be humble, gentle, patient. You see these words? Humble, gentle, patient. These are words that describe how we should walk with each other. Now, I want to give you briefly here. My wife and I have been reading a book called Crucial Conversations. Anybody ever read that book? It is a wonderful book. And it's all about how do you deal with the sticky, tough discussions in life that we all want to avoid. I don't want to sit down and have this tough talk because this is going to hurt this person. I have to tell them the truth, or I have to ask them, I have to confront them. I don't want to do this. So most of us run away. We don't want to deal with that. This book's all about how do you deal with that. So here's what they suggest, and I just think this is perfect. They have an acronym called STATE, okay? I'm going to give this to you. This is free, okay? I'm going to give you an acronym called STATE. You don't even have to buy the book because I'm going to give this to you here. Here's what they suggest, and they give you case studies. Now, they use a case study on this, and I'm going to use the case study because it's really good. So, a woman is checking out her credit card statement, a wife. And she sees on there a credit card payment to the XYZ motel that's a block away, okay? And she realizes, I didn't make that payment. I didn't stay in the motel. So it must be my husband who stayed in the hotel. So then she thinks, why was he staying in a motel a block away? Right? Imagine how your mind get going on that. So then she started to think, oh my goodness, what's happening here? Okay, you can picture this, okay? He's having an affair. He must be. There's no other way to explain this. There's a credit card thing, motel, it's him, there's no one else but him and me on this. Must be having an affair. This is the case study they give. So they give actually 5 points how to deal with this. I'm gonna use this case study. It's a kind of a severe one, but actually it's a good one for us to look at. The first one's this. Number one, here's the goal they say, and this is the same goal that these scriptures are sharing with us. The goal in your and my relationship when we share truth with each other is to keep safety. How many people here, when you feel safe with someone, when you feel like they care about you, when you feel like they're not going to rip your head off, but they love you, when you're safe, how many people know you're comfortable to say things, right? If you feel safe, you could say almost anything to somebody, right? So the point they make in this book, which I think is so true and so godly based on the scriptures we just read, is you want to keep a safe environment with the people you have to talk with. Keep it safe. In other words, keep it so that they feel comfortable to share with you. Because what happens is, as they state so eloquently in the book, is when we get aggressive and we shut things down, the shared pool of meaning, in other words, the opportunity for you and I both to share and to add to this discussion ends. And one person does all the talking, and the other person clams up. They either get violent or they get silent. You ever seen that? People will either retreat or they'll get angry and they'll start lashing back. And now we have a fight. And it's a bad discussion, and nothing good comes of it, right? You might feel good, I vented my anger. But in the end, nothing good comes. So here's what they say. Number one, share your facts. Share your facts. So let's use this case study. So the husband comes home, credit card, and right away, there's 2 ways this woman can approach this. Number one, she could be very emotional. He could come in. She could go, you're having an affair. I found your credit card. I know you're having an affair. You have this charge on the motel. And she could be crying and all upset. And he's like, what? Huh? What do you mean? I don't understand. Well, no, look at, I know you are. I know you are. So the first thing in dealing with anyone is, number one, share your facts. Start with the facts. I really like this. So, for example, in that situation, the facts would be, honey, I was looking at the credit card statement today, and I see that there's a charge to the XYZ motel down the road, and I didn't make that charge. And you're the only one on the credit card, so you could see how maybe I might wonder about this. Okay? Do you see what I'm saying? Is that person accusing the other person? Is there an accusation being made? No. You're sharing the facts. These are the facts. And it's the same with you and I if we have an offense with somebody. We have often, I don't know, you're probably perfect and have never done this, but I've done this. I'm just going to be very real with you. There's some facts we become aware of about somebody, maybe something said or their relationship with us. And rather than stay with the facts, we build a story around it. You ever done this? You build a story around it. You go, I know why they did that. I know why they said that. It's because she's thinking this way about me, and they did this, and you're making all these assumptions, right? You ever done that? Well, again, I'm putting it on me, okay? I know I've done that. And then you get with them, And when you get with them, are you clear in your conversation with them? No, you come in with all this story and assumptions. And you sit down in front of them and you tell them your story. Hey, listen, you. Well, do you think there's going to be safety there? Do you think they're going to share anything with you? Do you think there's any opportunity for this to be solved? You've just jumped in and made all these assumptions. So the key is start with the facts. These are the facts. This is what I heard. This is what, I heard you saying to me. This is what you did. This is what it looked like you were doing to me. Whatever. These are the facts. And then, do you understand how I might feel about that? Now, you're giving them an opportunity to say this is true or not. The second thing is tell your story. So, these are the facts. Based on these facts and what is happening, this is the conclusion I've been coming to. Is this true? Do you hear what I'm saying? Is this true? Now, you're also, number 3, ask for others' paths. In other words, encourage others to share both their facts and their stories. So this is where that other person sitting opposite you, you're now sharing kind of your story, what you think is happening, but you don't know for sure, but you think this is what is happening. Now you're open to them. And maybe the facts are wrong. So they say, actually, that's not what happened. You didn't get all the facts. This is what happened. Oh, you mean my facts are wrong? Yeah. Oh, that changes it. Yeah. Okay, good, right? Do you hear what I'm saying? Or, okay, those are the facts, but let me tell you my side of it. Let me tell you why I said that. Let me tell you why I did it. Here's my story. And maybe there can come some agreement. You go, oh, I get it now. I understand why you said that. Oh, you meant, oh, okay. Do you understand what I'm saying? So facts, then story. And then open to others' paths. Then the fourth thing is talk tentatively. Here's where we get into trouble. When we treat something as absolute fact because we believe it to be so. Anyone ever done that? I have. I've done it. I hate to admit it. But we do. We think, I feel this way. I believe this way. Therefore, it is so. Right? It's kind of like Star Trek. Make it so. We think it's so. And so we just believe that there's no other possible explanation because we are like the center of the universe, and this is what we think. Here's the thing. You and I don't know for sure. And when you and I talk like this is absolute fact, we usually are in trouble. You know what assuming is. And you know what assuming does. Okay, I don't have to spell it out, right? When we assume, it creates problems for you and me. It makes us look bad. We should never assume, but we do it all the time. And so the reality is we need to talk tentatively. And lastly, we need to encourage testing. We need to be open to other people challenging the way we think and what we're saying. Now, see, if we can do all that in safety and in a good way, in a calm way, without all the emotion, we actually have a shot at working this out. Now, this can happen on a church level with someone that you have an issue with. This can happen on a family level. Can you see how this could relate to a family level? Your son or daughter, something has happened, and you assume, and I've done these things, I'm just standing here really guilty, and you assume why and what, and then you go in with the assumption, and you're wrong, but you hurt that person because you didn't carefully take care of it, right? See, if we have a godly mindset, we want relationships to be repaired. We want relationships to be healthy. We want to protect relationship because God is all about relationship. He loves relationship with you and I and each other. He wants it to be healthy and truthful. So it's really important that we understand this. We can't go in like a freight train because we'll blow up the relationship if we go in like a freight train. I remember when I learned this big time about tone and polarizing people was when I was a co-editor of the college paper in Lethbridge, The Endeavor. And so I did that for a year. I was in a journalism program. And I wrote this editorial once about an issue that was close to my heart, an issue that was big as far as me being a Christian, and I was really upset about it. So I wrote this scathing editorial to get the truth out, and I had scripture, and it was just like, whoa, heavy duty. Anyway, so I had to read it to all my classmates because they were editorial board. And so I was a little nervous about that. How would you think I'd be nervous, right? Because most of them weren't on my perspective, right? So I have my page, kind of nervous. So I'm reading it. And then I notice their response. And so then I read it louder. As they respond, I'm reading louder and louder. Must have been funny. I wish I could go back and watch it now. But anyway, I was like 22 or something like that. So anyway, at the end, they said, well, should we let him publish it? Well, like, it's his opinion, so they did. But my teacher pulled me aside. And she was a good lady. And she said, Ian, I want to talk to you for a minute. It's like, okay. So we go over, and she goes, I agree with your perspective on this. I actually do. But she said, here's the thing about what you just wrote. Anybody who disagreed with you wouldn't read past the first paragraph. So what's the point of doing this? That's what she said to me. Like, why are you writing this? Just to get your, the people that believe like you to agree with you? Or you're trying to convince other people that maybe there's another perspective? And I went, well, actually, I want to convince people. That's kind of why I'm writing it. I want others to see my point of view. We said, well, you're way too polarizing. Like, you're coming in so hard and fast. You're thinking you're being right, that no one's going to listen to you. They're not going to give you any attention. Now, she said, you can say the same thing, but you can soften it and be diplomatic and present it in a way that actually keeps it, according to this, safe so that they can say, hey, maybe he's right. I'm willing to give him a chance. See, that's the same way we should approach relationships. See, that was something that just stuck. I remember I went and rewrote it. I showed her. She goes, that's much better, Ian. Way to go. And we printed it. And I've always determined this from that time on. I don't think I've always done it perfectly. But a decision I made was if someone's going to be offended with me, they're going to be offended at what I said, not how I said it. You hear what I'm saying? They're going to be offended because they don't like my message. They're going to go, I just don't like what you represent. But I'm not going to be offensive just in the way I presented it. I think that's key for us as Christians and dealing with relationships with each other. Okay. Secondly, these other points are really quick. Face to face. Face to face. Matthew 10 shows us, go privately and point out the offense. Here's the problem in our culture today. Face to face is becoming Facebook to Facebook. You understand what I'm saying? It is. It's becoming that way. You break up with your girlfriend on Facebook. How many people know that's pretty pathetic, right? It happens, though. Or texting. He broke up in a text. Is that pathetic or what? Seriously. But this happens all the time. Or an email. Or whatever. It started off that was all people could do is face-to-face. Jesus' day, you could maybe write on tablets, and send it by donkey. Be a while. But, generally, face-to-face is going to be what you need to do, right? But now we have lots of options. It used to be you had to phone. Okay, I can phone them. But now you don't even have to do that. You could Facebook. You could tweet it to the whole world and tell them how offended you are with somebody and, see you later. You could do that, which people do. But face-to-face, listen to me on this. Face-to-face is still the best way to deal with things. How many times, I remember one time, I got this email from my assistant in Medicine Hat. And she meant well. She's kind of your bottom line person. A lot of assistants are bottom line people. Anyway, just saying. Bev's laughing. But anyway, she's like a bottom line person. She sends me this email. And she, how many people know, even if you put a smiley face in, it doesn't change. It's like, that person's rude to me. Oh, there's a smiley face. That makes it all right. Anyway, she sends me this email. And she's, God bless her. And she's just trying to express something that's a concern. But man, there's no tone to it. Like, it just looks like bang to me, right? Like, whoa, whew, boy, that hurt. Well, I talked to her about it, and she didn't mean that at all. She said, oh, no, I didn't mean it like that. But see, in an email, unless you're really good at writing emails, and I try personally to try really hard to have tone and, make it so it's friendly. But if you're a bottom liner, sometimes email can be the worst thing. Because the other person can't see your face, they can't hear your tone, they just think, man, they just slapped me in the head. So that doesn't really help with safety, does it? It doesn't help with the pool of meaning, and let's work this out. You get an email like that, you're like, well, forget you, I'm done, right? Like you kind of get an attitude. Face-to-face is still the best way to do it. And, I like what Gmail's done. I think it's Gmail. They actually give you a 30-second delay when you write the email now. Did you know that? They actually give you, because, you ever written an email, you're like really angry, like, and then you send it. Now, I haven't actually done this. I try to keep myself down so I don't do it. I know people that have done it, though. They sent that email, and it felt good, like, right away. But then, like, in a minute, it was like, oh, shoot, I just lost my job. You know what I mean? Kind of like that. Like, I shouldn't have done that. That was really bad. It felt good, but now it feels terrible. So Gmail gives you 30 seconds to reconsider. It's like, do you really want to send this? You're like, no, better not. Delete. My point is, why, if there's some things you can't settle face to face, right? You can't always. But most of the time, you can at least do a phone call, couldn't you? I mean, there should be, I think human error, I rarely do anything by email like that. Anything serious, I don't send an email out. I don't send a Facebook thing out. I try to get with that person, especially if they live in proximity to me. I mean, if they live in Africa, maybe I have to do something like that. But if they live in my city, I want to get with them. I want to look at them. I want to talk to them. I want to make sure we're clear, face to face. Now, the only reason we don't do it again is out of avoidance and fear, right? It's easier to just send the email or do the text, because then I don't have to look at you and I'm kind of scared. Listen, get beyond that. Push through that. Go back to face-to-face. Go old school, okay? Third, one-on-one. Notice it says just the two of you. Just the two of you. Now, this is a big deal, because what can happen is before we go to that person, we talk to somebody else or 5 other people, just to make sure we're on the same page, just to make sure it's okay, just to make sure whatever. And by the time we've done that, we've actually poisoned 5 other people with our concern. Sometimes people go, oh, I never thought of it that way. You're right. You know what I mean? Like, now it's my cause. And maybe the facts are wrong. Maybe the story's wrong. You understand? So when I go to somebody else, I affect them. I affect their opinion of that person. I might affect the person who I have to talk to, because now they know that person knows, and that's hard for them, especially if it's wrong data. So you know what? The best thing always to do? Go to the person directly that you need to talk to. Don't go to a whole bunch of other people. You know one of the hardest things I found as a leader? I'll tell you right now. Someone comes to me and says, I have this concern, Pastor, and there's a number of us that do. Oh, but I can't tell you who they are. Oh, that sucks. Seriously, like, that's really poor. Like, I don't know what to do with that. What do I do with that? Is that the whole church? Is that like 2 people? I don't even know. What do I do with that? Don't do that. Don't do that. That is not right. You have an issue, you bring it. Don't go talk to a bunch of other people. Now, I want to say this. I've told people this before, and I mean it. In my old church, I used to say, look, you can come and talk to me. Do I seem like a hard guy? Because I try not to be. And if you, okay, Rob. Well, we'll talk about that. But, you can come and talk to me as long as you have a smile on your face and a good attitude. Like, don't expect I'm going to fight you. Honestly, if somebody comes and they have concerns and it's real, I will own it. I will. I've done it. But what is really hard for me personally to handle is when people won't tell me. And then I hear through several people, or it comes around to me. That's painful. That's just not biblical. We need to be honest. The only reason we do that is we're afraid and we don't want to deal with the person directly. And it's very divisive in a church. It can split churches. This is the way churches go down, because rumors start and people talk. Go to the person you have a problem with, just the two of you. Now, really important, I like what Brian A.C. spoke last week. He said something to me that I've tried to really follow. He said, I pray when I'm going to meet with somebody and I'm going to deal with an issue and they have an issue about me, I pray for them until I can come underneath them and I can have like tears in my eyes. I can actually understand where they're coming from. And I'm disarmed. I'm not so ready for a fight. I'm actually soft and ready to listen to them. I really like that. Was really good advice. I followed that at different times in my life. You can talk to God, and you should talk to God about that person, right? You should go to God. That's my point. Now, sometimes I know, and I'm going to give one proviso on this. Sometimes I know talking to a spouse or someone else close that you like can be helpful if you're trying to figure something out. I get that. I do get that. But the only reason you do that is because you want to deal with it. Not just because you want to dump on that person and have them carry it with you. Do you understand what I'm saying? You're actually trying to figure out how to deal with it properly. Your heart is to be honest and reconcile. That is the most important thing. So, go to them one-on-one. And the last point is get help. Here's the thing. If you and I go to that person, that's what the Bible says, and we work one-on-one with them, and they don't hear us, and they won't listen to us, and they're not following through or whatever, the Bible's clear that we can bring someone else in. Well, can we bring in Fred to help us? You and I aren't getting along here. We're not working it out. We just don't. Can I bring in Fred? I trust Fred. Fred could help us work this out. He has an unbiased view. Okay, bring in Fred. We love. Any Freds here? Oh, yeah, of course. Sorry, Fred. I always use Fred for like years, and I never had a Fred in the church. Anyway, God bless you, Fred. Anyway. That's funny. I've always used Fred. Okay, I got to come up with another name. Anyway, so the point is, let's bring that person in so they can help us work this out. So get help when you need it. And the last point is this. If you and someone else can't work it out with another friend, then you can always, if you're part of a church, you can always go to church leadership and say, hey, we are having a problem. We've had 2 meetings. We brought in someone else. We can't solve it. Would you come in and help us? Now, do you see the amount of effort that a person is willing to give to retain relationship here? Do you see that? It's pretty major, isn't it? As far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Follow the code. Follow the code. Go quickly, face-to-face, one-on-one, and get help when you need it. Would you stand with me?